studio, and it was really nice to have a really proper look at it, having seen it so many times on site. And you can see all the different campaigns of sort of restoration it had had over the years, where people had put sort of Sandtex paint or anything to make it look white and clean, and sort of would have given the form back, but it produced a lot of problems for the piece itself, because it meant that water was being trapped under layers and sub-layers of fills, some inappropriate fills and some inappropriate paint layers. So we did lots of tests to ascertain the best way of removing those layers without affecting the layers underneath, the original layers. We found that an acrylic disintegrator by Thermatech, along with Thermatech cleaning, which is a heat cleaning, removed it the best way we could. We moved it outside. We've got the protective layer we put around the object so that you can't see too much what's going on, and also so that it holds the messing, so there was a mess, as the layers, many layers came off. And it was a really beautiful autumn day, and the light's great because it's October. And as the sunlight shone across where we removed the first layers, you could see all these great working marks. It was really nice to see. They were just there. They were worn and not as fresh as they would have been, but so much better than it was, and we were really pleased. Then we started looking at the layering system of the work, and the basic concrete of this is a vermiculite and cement that was produced for Hepworth from the sort of maquette she made, which she then apparently she altered to carve down to make it more, you know, exactly what she wanted. And then she added some sand and cement on that to get a better form. Over the top of that, she then went on to put snowcrete. So I'll talk about that a bit later, but she just used snowcrete, which is basically white cement with no aggregate, which is unusual, and then topped that with snow stone, which is a white cementatious paint. So we were looking at the sort of systems she used. So because she used her top layer, nearly top layer, was just snowcrete, there's no binder or no sort of aggregate in that, so it was very prone to cracking. So basically the whole sculpture was covered in what you can see here in this one slide. It's basically snowcrete with some remains of snow stem over the top. And it just must be a terrible moment when it was made. The whole surface cracked all over. And there was a product out at the time called Snow Sand, which was designed to give an icy white crisp finish, which is what Hepworth specified. It was also sort of advertised as being very good for filling in lattice cracks and things, which they would have been. And on the slide next to it, you can see I replicated her technique, and the only way of replicating it using just snowcrete was to make it quite wet, perhaps like you would do with a plaster, and you put it on and get this slightly gloopy finish. So of course she was using pure cement, pure cement with no aggregate and quite wet. So what I've done on this piece next to it, you can see that's got the final layer on it. Even the final layer hasn't sunk into all the cracks. It was quite correct. Interesting areas we found when we were investigating the layers is you see some rust areas there, and we think those are from tools, because they're tooling marked with the rust layers in. So she did some tooling over the kind of sloppy sort of applications and then went in over it. So she was layering the system, and you can see some tip marks there showing how gloopy it was. It's similar to some of the other sort of plastics and things. When we replicate those, it has to be relatively wet. So looking quickly at some pictures of condition of it, you can see that here's an example of some of the armature in there and a previous repair that's been done, and the armature still cracking through. You can see the numbering system we've got here. We numbered the whole work in different colour coding so that we have reports showing exactly what we removed and what we did and what we replaced, so that any time in the future, any other campaigns of conservation that are needed can be based on what there is, the knowledge that's there already, so to inform. There's a top there where it just says 17. That's an old restoration there, but you can see there that the white snowcrete has been used with some sand. So you can see by adding sand, it no longer is white, which is, I think, why she probably did it. She probably thought, I'll miss the sand out because then it'd be icy white. And below that is a pencil line on an area of her substrate where it hadn't quite located on correctly. So that was quite interesting. But all those voids had to be treated and filled. It's very painstaking, the removal of the final layers after doing many of the larger layers of Thermtech, because every single bit that went into the artist's marks were just blocking the artist's marks. We needed to reveal as many as we could because we were very mindful we were going to coat it finally with snowstone, which is quite a heavy body. Then here you've got other campaigns of restoration where you have grey cement that was used. You've got the middle slide shows an area where there's sort of cracking going on and grey cement, and then the same side with that layer removed, but there was still more to remove. There's a lot of removing. Here is an example of one of the pieces of iron, steel rusted, that was treated, and then you have the vermiculite and cement fill in there before we then go and put the top layers on. So, working on this piece, you had to really contort yourself, and you kind of had to treat yourself to working on certain areas. The piece that Andrew's working on there, you only take that really for 20 minutes max, and you'd have to go and do a standing up section. It was a really interesting form because you had to get around it and over it and into it. Here's another example of other restorations being done in the past where someone took an angle grinder to large areas of it to presumably to get a key. So on occasion we left a lot of these areas if we felt they were stable and they weren't, delaminating or anything. But sometimes we just had to remove them because they'd been restored in a way that wasn't sympathetic to the shape, so they were clunky and wrong. And there you see underneath there is an example of me putting on the gloopy restored area before I wipe it down slightly to match it all in. Here's an example of an area, quite a large area that's missing. So the top slide area shows you the vermiculite core, in fact, which we then adhered some small shapes to take a new format, and then we had to build that up, and we used sand and white cement to build it up. And you can see the bottom left, as you look at the screen, we left a really small area that we then added just the white snowcrete onto to get the form. So we were really mindful of building it up in a way that would be stabilise it, give it the most strength. When we were doing those repairs, the piece had started to dry out because it was very wet when we first came to the studio. So we had to keep wetting it as the repairs were going and keep sort of shrouding it in the areas of plastic, keep it going. Also with this piece, it needed to have more fixings made underneath it. So Richard Rogers had some engineered fixings made to go underneath the piece so that every time it's moved now it's stable, but also we can have security fixings put underneath it. And it was really unpleasant because they were putting their heads under their stages to get things done, but it made a really good base, and now it makes it much more easy to move and secure. So finally, we had to use a snow sand on the top, and we experimented with lots of ways of applying it. But we realised quite early on, if we applied it by brush, it would fill all the areas of details that we'd so painstakingly kind of revealed in the very minute cleaning. So we had the suppliers of snow sand come to work with us, and we had to polythene the whole end of the studio up, which it still got everywhere, but we had to try and contain it. And then work with them so that it was sprayed on, which obviously would not have been what Hepworth did, but we were working with a sort of degraded surface. We wanted to keep what we could. So we sprayed it on so that we had as much on as we needed, not too much. And then we worked on it with sort of gloves to smooth down anything that looked sprayed. We didn't want any sprayed look, but we also didn't want to fill those crevices. And we also mindful, it's an interesting thing with snow, Sam, that for a short time afterwards, when it gets wet, it will show what's underneath the piece, but as it dries and cures, over time it becomes whiter and whiter and gives a much better protective layer. So it's quite an experience working with these guys. And then it was finished. So easy. No, it took a very long time. But when it was finished, it was lovely. We were able to see the piece, and it was a real pleasure to see it back as pretty much more similar to how it was in the 1950s outside the Festival Hall. And also what was nice is I heard Sophie talking about the spine of the piece, and the picture on the right, you can see the spine, and that's how we always refer to it as the spine. So thank you for listening, and thank you to everyone who helped, particularly the Hepworth estate, which without our input we would never have all the amazing archival details that we had to work on.